Welcome to Series 2 of the Go Potty podcast. I'm Rebecca Mottram, a children's nurse, potty learning specialist and author of Positively Potty. With earlier potty learning now more widely recommended, there's a lot to think about. In this series, I focus on the ideas, experiences and evidence that can help turn guidance into confident practice. So whether you're a parent, a health professional or you work in the early years, this podcast is here to guide you through it. If you want a full overview of my now widely recommended 3-step approach of preparation, practice and stopping using nappies, listen back to Series 1 where I cover that framework in detail. Hi and welcome back to the Go Potty podcast. I'm Rebecca Mottram, a children's nurse, potty learning specialist and a firm believer that when it comes to supporting our children, little steps are everything. Along the way, parents often get stuck with potty training. They tell me that progress has slowed or stopped and they don't know what to do now. So if that's you, this episode's really going to help. But actually, today's episode is a special one because I'm not just going to be talking about how you can use little steps to stop using nappies or about wheeze or poos directly. We're talking about little steps as a philosophy that sits behind every successful change you're going to make with your child. It's something I teach in potty training all the time, but honestly, it applies to any area of parenting when your child feels stuck, resistant, worried, or overwhelmed. And that is the power of little steps. Little steps are not just a strategy, they're a way of seeing your child. They're a way of understanding how humans, especially small humans, learn, adapt and grow. So today I'm going to break down what little steps really means and how they work and how you can use them to make any kind of change without a battle or pressure or without tears. Children don't resist because they're being difficult. They resist because something feels too big. And as adults, we think linearly and we often see the end point. So when it comes to sleeping in their bed, leaving the house, brushing their teeth, trying new foods, or potty training, we often picture the final outcome and it makes sense to us to move for that goal. But for your child, the final outcome is often miles away from where they're standing, and so the gap between here and there can feel really big and scary. So little steps shrinks that gap. And what's beautiful is that when children experience success with little steps, their world expands and their confidence grows and they learn that they are capable, safe and supported. Understand that one of the biggest misconceptions parents have is that if you lower expectations, you're also lowering the bar, or you're giving in, or you're stepping backwards. But actually, lowering expectations is what allows your child to move forwards. So if I ask a child, come and sit on the potty and do a wee, that's quite a big ask. But if I say, where's the bathroom? Can you show me? That's a small step. Or maybe I might say, show me how you sit on the potty and count to 3. It's more doable. These are potty examples, obviously, but you can use the same approach in other situations. For example, let's go to the door and put your coat and shoes on. It's quite a big step. But if I say, can't find your coat, can you help me look for it? Then what we've done is we've started the process with a small step, with lower demand. And lowering the ask doesn't make you permissive, it makes you strategic. So you're creating an environment where success is possible, and success, no matter how small, will drive the learning forwards. Break down the step until it becomes doable. And this is such an important thing to do when you hit resistance, because resistance is a sign that the step is too big. If your child can't take the step needs to be smaller. And then we can break it down further and further, and sometimes even further than that. In fact, I will often say break it down until it feels almost ridiculously small, because that tiny step is often the exact one that your child is ready for. So for example, maybe for a child who's really scared to go to the bathroom or resistant, I might recommend trying something like, let's go and touch the bathroom door and come back before we count to 10. So that's a tiny step that they might be willing to make. Once they're happy with that, and next time you might say, let's go into the bathroom, count to 3, and then come back, and so on. Or perhaps they might say, put something in the bathroom for your child to go and fetch and bring back to you. So these are small steps, but they don't mean no progress. They mean meaningful progress. Because when the brain feels safe, the learning speeds up. And when the brain is pressured, the learning will shut down or stop completely. So this is often why progress sometimes stops. One thing I really want you to take away from this episode is the idea of consolidation. So as I said before, parents often think that progress is linear, but it isn't, ever, actually. Children will make a step or a leap forward, and then sometimes they'll stop. And it's not because they're slipping backwards or because they're refusing, and it's not because they're being difficult. What's actually happening here is that they are consolidating. They're processing the new step that they've taken. They're absorbing it and they're wiring it into their nervous system. So they're testing it out and they're making sure they still feel safe. And this is something that we can't rush and we shouldn't try to interfere with. This is a sign that your child is exactly where they need to be. Some children take a day to consolidate, some take a week, some take a month, some take longer. Your job as their parent is to hold the space and keep things steady while they do the internal work. So let's also talk about overwhelm, because overwhelm is the enemy of progress. Whenever a child feels overwhelmed, their brain goes into protection mode. And this can look like shutting down, refusing, running away, having a very emotional response, maybe crying or being angry, or pretending that they can't do it, and often also just saying no before you've even had a chance to ask them the question. And we know that this isn't about being naughty. It's really biology, okay? So if you want to support a child who's overwhelmed, we can't push harder. We have to reduce the step. So say to yourself, okay, that step is too big. The demand is too high. I haven't set my expectation according to where they are at. So let's make this smaller. And that is how you're going to keep learning going and moving forwards, but without having the battles and the frustration. So I want to give you a few examples of how this might look. Okay. So you could apply this to brushing teeth, for example. You might first just get your child to hold their toothbrush, or tap their toothbrush on their tooth, or brush just one tooth and then be done. Okay, so these are also steps that desensitize as well, rather than demand. So they're still feeding into that learning process. Or maybe trying new foods. And let's give the example of broccoli, because for some reason parents love it when their children eat broccoli, don't they? So with this one, you might say, can you smell the broccoli and tell me what it reminds you of? You'll probably get some funny answers to that. Or you might say, can you choose a name for this broccoli? Or can you put the broccoli on a separate explorer plate next to you? So what you're doing here is you're engaging them with this, but you're not asking them to eat it, okay? So it's a small step towards eating it, but it's a long way from eating it. And this is going to give your child a bridge between where they are now and where they need to be. And what you're doing really is removing the fear. What is the smallest thing that could happen that would be the next thing that your child could do? And then is there an even smaller step before that one that they could do? And the right step is always the one that they can do, not the one that you wish that they could do. So just keep breaking it down and thinking smaller and smaller and smaller until you reach the step that your child can say yes to today. And all the way through this, celebrate the process, celebrate the engagement. Think about your child's engagement being a little bit like a candle flame on a windy night. Maybe it's a tea light. You're going to protect that tea light from being blown out by the wind, okay? You're going to put it in a glass. You're going to keep it somewhere out of the wind. And you need to think about your child's engagement being just like that. And eventually, if you can protect it, it will grow. And that tiny flame could grow into a huge bonfire. And as you're going through that process of growth, acknowledge to your child, what have they done that was a step in the right direction. So maybe it's something like, you stepped into the bathroom today. That was really brave of you. Or you let your toothbrush touch your tooth. That's progress. Or you allowed your broccoli to sit on the plate with you during dinner. That was really good trying out. Okay, so whatever it is that your child has managed to do, acknowledge that and keep that process being celebrated in these small ways of acknowledgement, because then your child will be willing to take the next step and the next and the next, because you're keeping that trust. So as you go through your week, I want you to notice the moments where your child seems stuck. And instead of thinking, how do I get them to do this thing? Ask yourself, what would the smallest possible step look like? And you might find that thinking about it in that way is really going to transform that dynamic. So little steps is not about rushing or dragging your child forward. It's about going at your child's pace, building and maintaining trust, and helping them to feel safe. Because when children feel safe, they grow in ways that will really surprise us. If you'd like a clear, evidence-based guide that brings everything together that we've talked about, my book, Positively Potty, covers the full approach in detail, from early preparation and practice through to stopping using nappies, and how to support children at every stage of the journey, including tackling complex problems. You can find Positively Potty wherever books are sold. Thanks for listening to the Go Potty podcast.